Good afternoon. This is your host, Molly and Mario. Today, we're doing part 2 to our astrologers who predicted their own death video topic. And today, Mario is going to discuss the astrologer Grant Lewi, who, what were his active years?
He was born around 1901 or 1902, and he was active till the 50s, till 1951.
Yeah, so today we're going to unpack his career as an astrologer a little bit, and then really get into his death prediction of his own demise.
I'll just say a couple of things about death. Hopefully I won't go on forever. So maybe we'll do another video on this. I'd like to, just about the whole idea of an astrologer predicting their own death. You know what I mean? It's kind of it's a self-referral system. It's almost like a nested system, right? Where an astrologer can somehow reach into their grave and find the temporal coordinates of it. You know, it's a fascinating thing if you take that into account, right? It's almost like a hyper sigil marker where an astrologer can pinpoint that place in the sky where he or she is going to depart from this realm, right? Because we arrive here on the Tropic of Cancer and we leave here on the Tropic of Capricorn. And here we go. I already see your look. And so it's a kind of meta perspective or meta assessment of cosmos. And it plays into a lot of the modern ideas around the times that we're living in, you know, the idea that we live in some kind of simulation or simulacrum, right? The idea that we're in some kind of matrix and all this kind of fun stuff, and you know, which has some relevance. But yeah, we're gonna get into it with. We're gonna start by looking at Grant Lewi's chart. Molly, did you want to add anything to that intro?
No, I like the intro a lot. I could add something. I guess I like where you were going with that of it being this where our soul departs. I think that's actually a really cool idea. And we touched on this in the first astrologers who predicted their own death video, but I want to add that it can be a topic that people shy away from because of fear around death, or yeah, it can be, the idea of going somewhere else is scary because it's unknown, but death is an important part of living. And so looking at predispositions for disease, for instance, in our chart, or health risks in our chart, it can help us like have more awareness on how we live more fully. But I do want to add that I was doing research on some other astrologers who had predicted their own death, and it's interesting because just because you could predict it theoretically doesn't mean you can escape it. So I think it brings up an interesting idea of fate and free will. You know, like you could know, okay, this is when I think I'll die, and then there's nothing you can do about it, kind of thing. So it gets into that territory.
I'm going to answer that with this image. So here we see Grant Lewi's birth chart. And what I've heard is that the right side of the chart, the right side of the pizza, which is going to be the viewer's left. No, well, let's just go like this, where the ascendant is, that side, that's one side of the pizza. And then the other side would be my right, but I don't know about the viewers, probably the same. So I've heard that the right side is associated with fate and the left side with free will, which would mean that people that have like big, you know, heavy 6 houses like myself, there's like a lot of fated things they experience in the lifetime. And that would have to do with 4th, 5th house, 6th house, 7th, 8th, and 9th. And it's interesting that death is on that side of the chart because it's ruled by the 8th house, right? So that's interesting. Whereas free will, if it's indeed corresponds to the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 11th, 12th, and 9th, and 10th as well, is in contrast to the way we shine, we choose to shine in the world. Anyway, those are just just because you brought that up, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's fascinating. I'm curious though, because the 12th house being the house of our ultimate conclusions, that notion that is actually chosen, like we choose that maybe when we depart.
Well, 12 is very karmic, right? And then also in the 12th house, when there's planets in the 12th, there's secrets to be unraveled in the lifetime, right? We see that he has his moon there. And in general, it's just, I mean, we could go in so many directions with that, but we'll just keep it to that and dig into his chart. I did want to say one more thing, I think, and that was maybe just a little about his background. So Grant was a pioneer of chart synthesis. And he did this in this specific book, which is Heaven Can Wait, which is where he has sun moon combination descriptions, and then there's an interesting grid for every aspect, and they're all numbered. And as you read your sun moon, he refers to these numbered aspects in a grid, and you can add and nuance your sun moon with those aspects. So it's really interesting kind of little grid system he created. Also, he's a pioneer of free will astrology. I didn't dig enough into that, but it's interesting in light of what we've been saying just now. And then of course his sun and Pluto do fall on the free will side of the chart, so that's interesting.
That's a very modern thing, the whole free will astrology. Robert Bresney, he's like a modern astrologer who has a editorial rather called Free Will Astrology. And I think you and I, Mario, have talked about this before, how the modern perspective is very like, it's all free will. And then when we get into the ancients, they're like doom and gloom a little bit. Like,
well, they're extremely direct, right? And like even in their
prejudices, on like a fearful perspective. And so it's kind of like, I think you and I maybe try to tread the balance between those.
Yeah, I'm definitely not interested in like we're gonna escape the Reaper's grasp. I mean, maybe in some sense we are living in a time that's kind of interesting in the sense that we're at the end of a Kali Yuga, where it's pretty much endgame in the sense of spirits incarnating on this plane. There's also human design's take on it, which is we're shifting from the right angle cross to a new cross. There's also the Pluto interregnum. Pluto's like going through its complete cycle. And now Pluto's going into Aquarius, which is like mass deaths. I mean, it's just lots of barrels of fun in our times. I'll leave it like that.
But death is a proponent of life.
Well said. Yeah, thanks for bringing it back to that, because it defines life without that limitation. That limitation in itself is what gives life its value. At least its value in being in a body, right? Okay, so let's start up. Okay, let's look at this chart, Molly. So we see right away the most important part and personal part of the chart. The ascendant is in Leo. My sense of this is anytime someone has the ascendant in Leo, is they're moving from a sense of self-understanding to self-actualization, meaning to say they're coming to terms with understanding their own act, their own stage time in the realm of life. It's very important for a Leo rising to come to terms with their own personal self-value and make sense of themselves. So self-understanding is really the key in a Leo ascendant chart. And that self-understanding has to move on its continuum to self-acceptance and self-value. And we have here with Grant, we also see he's a Sun, Pluto, Gemini conjunction he has. So Sun in Gemini, he's got Pluto, I think exactly conjunct, and 1 degree, or 2 degrees actually, 2 degrees. And so some would say, I think the term is Kazimi, right, in the ancient astrology. And some would say that Pluto's thus overpowering his Sun. And in a way, that's what's happening. I mean, we have someone who's for the collective, who's bringing great truth to humanity. We have someone whose life is overshadowed by what he's bringing, by the truth that he's bringing, you know? And you mentioned in our last take of this, Molly, something about that. Do you want to carry forth with that?
Well, Evangeline had the trine of sun, or sorry, the square of sun squaring Pluto. But I do know two very well-known modern current astrologers with this aspect who've talked about it, actually having it. And yeah, it gives a lot of influence, without a doubt. Their identity is so fused, as you noted, with the pulse of the culture of the times. And yeah, they're here to transmit something to the generation, if you will.
Yeah, it's a very collective impact that these astrologers or these people bring to their to this their density reality. I myself have it as well. It's at a sign, but it's not that close, but it still impacts me in the sense that there's like a scorpionic layer to myself that I feel, the suspiciousness, you know, kind of reserve, right? Which is what you would get, which anyone would have with this.
And like intense depth, because it's shining a spotlight into Pluto. Like your soul is Pluto in a sense. And I mean that in the sense that, like, even being an astrologer that wants to look at death, you know, it's fascinating. It makes sense. He's a Plutonic astrologer, you could say. They want to,
right. And
not shying away from any information.
and I love this because I mean, my website's Plutonic Planes, and like I'm all about these ideas of like exploring the plane or planet of Pluto as like there being like a world of Plutonians who are like living underground, attempting to resurrect themselves from that grave and actually be here in the world and share their message, you know, or actually deal in the living worlds, because, you know, the death worlds are like when you're stuck in traumas and all the Plutonian themes, you know, and then you have to bring the knowledge from that, right?
Do you know if his particular biography, I know you said you don't have so much on his personal biography because
no,
maybe
not
he
too
didn't, I don't know
much.
if he had
There wasn't
one.
too much information.
Right.
We know that he studied English literature and then he was a self-taught astrologer. I mean, we know this guy, when you look at the fact that he's a Sun, Pluto, Gemini, we want to take that into account too. And he's got his North Node, you know, right there bordering the 4th house, 3rd house. I had another chart where his North Node was in the 3rd house. So it is in Gemini. Let me see here, make sure I'm correct here. Well, in this chart, actually, no, we got a Scorpio. Okay, so this is someone who's, you know, I don't know. Okay, I'll relate it like this. He grew up in New York and he moved to Arizona with his family. So family was really important. Being an astrologer was really important. And the manner of his death was so sudden, right? It was so sudden, and we'll see that when we get to the when we do the synastry, when I show the chart that has a synastry between his birth and death. But this is a guy who actually took out a life insurance policy prior to his death, like a month or two prior. So not only was he certain, but he made sure that his family was okay, right? And here you go with the North Node in the 4th house of family. So very, very interesting relation there. Let me go over a couple more things to his chart. You guys will also notice we have Jupiter in the 7th, which is blessings from partnerships, especially marriage. Sure enough, he was married with children. We see Moon in the 12th, which is very psychic, very powerful place. And then we see Uranus in the 5th, opposing This, you mentioned this in our last take. Uranus in the 5th opposing his Sun Pluto conjunction, which is like, an activation of genius, right? To his Sun and to his Pluto. These are like the outer workings. This is like the fate kind of coming in and bringing in all this information to him. With that Sun opposed Uranus, right? That's like a access to the streams of genius, electricity, all that rules astrology in itself as well. Uranus rules astrology, and bringing in, it's also could be destabilizing a little. This would have been like a hard worker, someone who always needed to be active. I don't think this guy could relax. You want to add anything to that, Molly? Any other aspects?
Well, I agree with all the aspect kind of comments. I would say though, I tend to use whole sign house system. So in that, I believe Aquarius would rule his 8th house, which might be interesting to examine in light of him having a sudden spontaneous death. It was some sort of like a hemorrhage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like a brain.
Yeah, so you saying that, I'll bring it to this. So in the Placidus chart, which is what we have up, we see that his 8th house cusp is 0 degrees Pisces. Molly mentioned that the 7th, that the 8th in, did you say Vedic or did you say Siddhari?
No, whole sign house system.
Okay.
I'm not talking about zodiacs, I'm talking about the house system.
So in that case, Uranus would be the ruler of the 8th. In this case, I have testimony for the 8th house working in the sense that a month or so prior, there was a new moon that activated the planet Uranus. And Uranus looked like it was the killing planet, one of the killing planets, one of the shots from the grassy knoll at his death chart. Go to that next. Do you want to add anything before we change charts?
No, we can go to that one.
Okay. Before we do, if you're okay with it, I'm going to take a quick peek. I did his human design chart as well. Let me just take a quick peek at that. Well, it's not coming up though. Let's see. Yeah, so his human design profile is really, really intense. It's one of the 6-line profiles, but in this case, the most intense one, which is the 3-6-6-3 kind of dynamic, which are people that experience something in 1 hour, experience so many things in 1 hour, 1 day that most people don't experience for like a whole month. Like life is just on fast forward all the time. And he was an MG, so he was busy. He was had tons of energy. Split definition, emotional wave, needed time to make his follow-throughs. 2 main channels he had. He had the channel of rhythm, which is being in the flow, nature. He would have loved being in nature. He would have loved having a schedule every day, set certain things. And then with that 35, 36 on the side, the channel of transitoriness, he would have loved adventure, exploration, especially with others. He would have loved his travel with his family to Arizona, or that move they made. That 20 gate there, like a high moral compass. You'll notice, Molly, he has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 overlays. That's where the red and black is. And
you cut out. What did you say?
Okay, I was talking about notice the parts in the gate where it has red and black?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So those are the overlays, and he has 6. So this is a guy that doesn't miss anything. This is like super aware consciousness, right? To have 6 overlays means he doesn't miss anything. He could see his own patterns. So anyway, that's his human design chart. This is, again, a manifesting generator with a lot of energy, a lot of quick brilliance, a lot of impatience, possibly. Okay, so let me get out.
I'll add too that with human design, the centers that are open are more susceptible to being overstimulated, perhaps overworked, health issues. That's how I look at it. And he's got an open mind and open ajna.
It's interesting that he died suddenly, because usually with an open spleen, they're aware of their death for a
Well,
while.
he knew he was gonna die.
Yeah,
Predicted it.
maybe it's that open spleen knowledge as well.
Yeah. If he predicted his death, he knew it. He might not have known exactly how, but he knew it was coming.
So open spleens are known for that. And I'm talking about the triangle on the left for everyone listening. Open spleens are known for feeling everything in their body. They're not able to like get that feel good all the time. They need someone's connection or someone else with that center defined in order to have the feel good.
Cut out a bit. Will you repeat the last sentence? Sorry.
Yeah, I was saying someone with an open spleen needs definition in order to needs that center kind of conditioned in order to get their feel good. So
which pets survive.
Okay, so let me get out of this. Let's go to that chart. I'm not trying to race through, but like I know how we are for time at times. Okay. So I like to call this the birth omega chart, apparently. That's what I wrote. So here's the synastry chart. I'll just share that image. Okay, so we have him on the inner wheel, and on the outer wheel, we have his death time. Again, the death time is not exact, so I put 12 noon. And there's even some discrepancy between the 2 days, but the only aspects that would be out of line would be the moon, as the moon switches the sign every 2.5 days. So anything you want to, any insights you want to share right away? Anything that jumps out at you, Molly? And if you want, I could remind you what you added in the first take of this.
I know we already filmed this, so like it was a while ago. Let me just like sit with it because I haven't looked at this in a while.
Sure.
Well, Uranus, it looks like, is just entering the 12th, his 12th house, which I find interesting.
Why? Tell me why.
Uranus being the bringer of transitions, of sudden changes, entering the 12th house of death and loss.
What about the planets that it just hit?
Yeah, just would have crossed over his Mercury and Neptune.
And so now I'll remind you of how he died. He had a brain hemorrhage.
Brain, yeah, that makes sense.
And it was I don't have any details on it, but I imagine it was pretty sudden. And then with Mars right there, with Uranus,
yeah.
right, bringing the sudden violence, inner exploding, right, in his mind, Mercury. The mind is, well, Aries rules the head. As far as the planet that rules the head, I'm not completely sure. I think it depends on the part of the head. So we don't know exactly where the brain hemorrhage occurred. You know what I mean? We don't know the exact detail of that, because that could change the rulership pretty easily. As far as the planet, but we know Aries rules the head. And so that's real interesting. And my point earlier was that Uranus was super powered by a new moon that happened about a month or two before. Sorry, not a new moon. It was actually, yeah, it was a new moon, but then there was also an eclipse, and it was a solar eclipse that occurred in Pisces at, I think it was at 16 degrees. So 3 months prior, there was a solar eclipse that happened in his 8th house. So it didn't hit any of his planets, at least not directly, because it wouldn't, yeah, he has nothing. It might have hit his Venus. Well, no, I'm looking at the wrong chart. Yeah, there was nothing it hit that I can see it hit directly, but there was a solar eclipse, which is going to be a new moon. It's an eclipsing of the sun, so the solar force, and that would have happened in his 8th house. So that could have been one of the shots fired that he was aware of. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
Another one being the new moon on July 4th. And that's prior to his death as well. That's maybe 10 days, 11 days. That would have, that's the one that powered up Uranus. So Uranus would have been kind of electrified and nuanced by that transit.
Did you happen to pull the progress? Did you happen to pull the progress chart?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I'll have to remember that for next time. But yeah, so very interesting. A lot of players here in this. I mean, looking at a death chart, there's a lot of things we want to look at, right? I mean, me and Molly are by no means experts at predicting someone's death or knowing all the aspects. There's other astrologers. There's a buddy of mine. If you guys check out, I'm forgetting the site, but I'll remember it in just a second.
I would say most modern people aren't interested in that, though.
I know.
Unless you're extremely stoic.
Right.
Most aren't interested in that thought exercise. But I would say to consider for sure progressions, you would want to look at the, in Vedic, you would look at the Mahadasha period that you're in. In Western, you would want to look at maybe your annual perfections and the yearly perfections. That is annual perfections. There's another Hellenistic timing technique where you look, it's kind of the Western dasha system. I'm blanking on what it's called right now, but you would look, because a transit alone won't necessarily result in death, but it would be like a transit compacted with things like an eclipse within a certain time cycle that you're in. So it's kind of like a perfect storm of things conferring, resulting in like taking you out, I would say, or helping you transcend rather.
I can't find this chart, but yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for adding all those different methods and the idea that it's kind of a perfect storm. However, I mean, for sure there are planets, like you'll have like a Heilig in a chart or a planet in a chart that's actually the killing planet sometimes, the one that will kind of pull the final trigger. And also Saturn's really important in death aspects. And I think here we have Saturn looks like it's in transit. Saturn's in Virgo. That would be squaring his sun. That would be squaring the sun, Pluto.
And the sun's the ruler of his ascendant, which is a health house.
Good point, right? Well, yeah, that's what I forgot to go over in the beginning. Being a Leo ascendant, sun is the ruler of the chart. He's got no other planets near the ascendant line. So no other planet is competing for that. That's rules his life force and rules the chart. So great points there. So just a note on that, I know no one's interested in this. I don't assume, right?
Let's not assume. They're watching this video.
Right? And I'm definitely interested, and I've done research on my own chart. I don't know how far I'm willing to go with it, you know what I mean? But I have seen markers, but of course we can look.
I have two accidentally. I was looking at Pluto transits and I was tying it into why am I blanking on what this is called right now? It's the Hellenistic timing technique. Do you know what I'm talking about? Zodiacal releasing. Sorry, that's what it is. So I was looking into, I had done my zodiacal.
That one gives clues on it as well. It does.
Oh, hell yes. And I was just looking at when my next rough Pluto transits would be. And it's like when I'm pretty old. And I was like, that might be the one that'll take me out in like my 70s. But hey, maybe not. I have an interesting little story to share at the very end. So I'll let you kind of finish.
We don't have much time. Okay, so I'm going to go into my friend. So there's an astrologer. I'll just say it, 100percentastrology.com. And he actually will do a reading to find out your time of death. And he's using ancient techniques. He's really into Vedias and has done some work on translating kind of Vedias's work. So go ahead into your story, but this is like Such fascinating stuff.
Okay. Anything else about Grant Lewi before I go into this? It's kind of a non sequitur.
What is your story about? Now you make me want to like
That another astrologer I recently read about from like the 1500s who had predicted his death. Besides,
let's
you know,
save
the
that,
two.
let's save that for a video. Let's save that for a video. Let's not
Well,
go-
no, it's like a really, I didn't find enough research. It's like a 2-minute
okay.
thing I want to share.
Okay.
So earlier in the video, I said, yes, we could predict it, but almost what's the point, right? Because there was this astrologer, I forget his name, Naboth or something, Valentin Naboth, I think was his name. He was like from the Renaissance period, he was a German mathematician and Aquarian as well, similar to Evangeline Adams and a lot of notable astrologers. And he was an astronomer, and he found signatures for when he believed would be when he died. And so what he did was he stored all this food in his house, and he locked himself in his house because he had a like, oh, the death is coming. And ironically, well, maybe not ironically, fate would have it that these burglars, these robbers, saw that his house was all boarded up, and they go in and they break in and they like murdered him. And he had, you know, taken these measures to, you know, in a way be like on top of it, right? And be outsmart the astrology, if you will. And then I think it goes to show like, yes, we can have all the knowledge, all the information, but embrace it, you know?
But at the same time, it doesn't show anything because everyone has their own reason for exploring their death chart. Not everyone's a fraidy cat and trying to find it so they can find a way to avoid it. You know what I mean? They're gonna get it. We all know we're gonna get it. No one gets out of here alive, as my uncle likes to say.
Of course. It's a rite of passage, you know? You know, I just thought that was a funny story because he was coming at it.
It's hilarious. It's really good. It's kind of like, you know, when you watch certain films, you know, we're like, there's a lot of weird like horror films coming out these days where it's like there's characters, like I'm forgetting the name of the film, but one that came out recent years where like there's basically a ghost that starts to haunt each person and try to kill them. And it's almost like, right, it's a personification of death. Death comes for us all, right? And it was a really disturbing movie for many reasons, which is probably good I'm not mentioning it. I'm not trying to give it any play, you know, or recommend anyone to watch it. But if someone has, they'll know what I'm talking about. But it's just, yeah, it can be highly disturbing. I mean, the transition from this realm to the next, you know, the care we want to give to this is it's not always an easy transition for everybody. For some people, it's sudden. For some, it's very painful, you know.
For some, it's peaceful.
What's that?
For some, it's peaceful and beautiful.
Right. And, you know, and I used to do caregiving and I've experienced, you know, such. And it's either way, it's very impactful and it's a very sacred kind of, you know, moment, these transitions. And death, even in itself now, during the time we live, might even be something that has shifted and changed.
We have like less than a minute, but I want to ask one more thing of you.
Yeah.
And that is, what would be a reason besides fear that someone would want to know their death?
Oh, I don't like that question. I'm not going to answer it. I don't like it.
Okay. Well, why explore this then?
It's up to the individual, you know. I mean, we're complex beings, you know. We're going to explore what we're going to explore. I mean, the nuance of all these planetary expressions comes through all of us in a different way. I don't know. I don't feel like there's too little time for me to like see if I can compile all the reasons. But yeah, it's just there would be so many. Anyways, thanks, Molly. Thanks, everyone. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you in the next video.
Take care.